So welcome, folks, to our webinar today. We're going to be taking a look at what you do once you've actually made an acquisition. And I'm hoping this will be a practical guide for business owners who are either in the middle of an acquisition, looking at doing an acquisition, looking to get ready to do an acquisition. In terms of today's webinar, my name is Andi Gray. And the work that we're doing here at Strategy Leaders, I'm the president and founder, is all about research that came out of work I did at Columbia University. As a company, we started that work over 30 years ago, and we've been in business for nearly 30 years. And we have a skilled team of specialists who work at growing and developing both the owners and management teams of privately held businesses. And our goal is to ensure that they last longer, make more while they're in business, and exit more profitably when they're ready. Over the 30 years, we've had experience in all kinds of industries. I am always fascinated by the ways that business owners find to go to work and make money. And it is one of my joys to learn about each and every one of your businesses. We do have a nationwide footprint. I like to say we work north to south and east to west in continental US, and can handle just about any location with the resources that we have. And we do offer a broad set of services, which I'll get into in just a second here. So in terms of the ways that we can help, on the left-hand side, you'll see things that you probably are most interested in if you've signed up for today's webinars. We do valuations of businesses very inexpensively, very quickly, get business owners a trading range of what a business is worth. And we work both with buyers of potential businesses and sellers of existing businesses. We do then migrate that for some companies into buy-sell advisory, where we work either on the buyer or seller side to help get the deal over the finish line. And this is no easy thing to do. The stats say that about 90% of deals that get started never cross the finish line. So this is a critical phase, and our track record is virtually 100% completion. In terms of supporting acquisitions, we do things like develop KPIs, key performance indicators. We help to forecast and what if model, what would this look like under varying conditions. And we do that both pre-sale and post-sale. And then once the sale happens, we do work on transition planning and implementation of what has to happen long term. Over on the right-hand side, you see more of the people development, the work that we do. So we develop management teams, either those that are currently in place, those that need to be put in place, developing talent to move up onto the management team. We do executive coaching, so that's one-on-one with the various individuals who are looking to develop skills. A lot of our work is family-owned business related, next generation training and development. Today, I see a lot of businesses that do have family members involved, and those next generation are looking to move up and take on ownership responsibilities. But next gen goes beyond family-owned businesses. It includes employees in the corporation, future members of the corporation, and members of teams that are in the middle of an acquisition. So it's all about making sure that the company does have a talent pool for the next generation. We work on business growth programming, so making sure that companies have the wherewithal to double revenue and triple profit in repetitive cycles. And we work on plans that ensure accountability reporting. So with that, let's talk about what we've covered so far. This webinar is actually an outgrowth of a webinar that we did last month that was all about making an acquisition. And if you've missed that last webinar, you see a QR code on the right that you can grab and go take a look at that webinar, and that'll give you some context for what we're talking about today. In that webinar, we talked about the benefits of acquiring, what an acquisition is, common risks and challenges that business owners get themselves into, and then what the 5 steps of the acquisition process are. So if you didn't see that and you're interested in figuring out more about an actual acquisition, pre-acquisition, please go take a look at this webinar. So now let's get started with you making the assumption that the business has been acquired, and how do you go about integrating the acquired business, which is a complex program. In order to successfully accomplish a post-acquisition integration, there are 4 things that I want to focus on to start with. One is you need to make and follow a plan. You need to align people and functions and make sure that you're preventing any disruption. You have to pay attention to the outward look and feel of what it is that you're doing, and then be ready and prepared to step in and address disconnects. So let's take each one of these and unpack them one by one. In terms of making and following a plan, it is important that everybody knows who will be on the takeover team. One of the challenges that I see in a lot of acquisitions is everybody was so busy getting the acquisition done, there wasn't enough time to figure out who would actually move over onto the takeover team and help ensure that the takeover goes well. And so you end up real timing it, which can be dicey for everybody involved. Do make sure that your takeover team, either planning process or if you're in the middle of it, make sure they do clear their schedules, either part-time or full-time, depending on how much you're going to need them, so that they can step away. Often this does create opportunities for other people in the company to step up into bigger roles to back up the people who are stepping away to work on the takeover. Make sure that you do identify and communicate issues that came up during due diligence. Oftentimes the takeover team was not the due diligence team, and they need to really understand what issues might be out there that they should be prepared to step in on right away. You want to build, I like to recommend that you build 90-day integration plans. So build several of those, first 90 days, second 90 days, third 90 days, fourth 90 days. That'll get you through the first year. And this allows you to work very quickly in very high focus on what has to happen in a very defined period of time. In terms of communication, I believe you can't communicate enough. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And this is to employees, to customers, and vendors. Use every modality you've got. Email, phone calls, face-to-face meetings, letters. We don't tend to mail a lot of letters around these days, but they can be very helpful. But make sure that you are talking to everybody who is involved in this acquisition. And pay attention to the people who are in the old the old company that could be affected, as well as the people that you're targeting in the new company. And as part of that old make sure that you are continuously monitoring the old course performance to make sure that things do stay on track. The worst thing that can happen is you put all your time and energy into the new and the old co's performance starts to lag, and you don't have the cash flow you were counting on from that old company to support what you need to do in the new company while you're taking over. Well, in addition to figuring out how to align, you need to make sure that you're preventing disruption. This is going to be about people, and people have feelings and have thoughts and have responsibilities to their families as well as to the company. They're going to work individually and on teams, and it may or may not be something that they understand how they fit in or what's expected of them. And you want to make sure that you don't get into assumptions that are going to lead to disruption. Now, a lot of times you have to look at the cultures, acquisitions that I've done. And, we have a company acquiring a different company, and there's an entirely different culture, whether that is a culture that comes from where people come from, or a culture that is a mode of behaviors, and you want to make sure that if there are differences in the cultures, that you address it, just don't turn a blind eye to it. You're going to have to address work habits and schedules, and then also you're going to have to focus on the external, which is the brands and the customers, and we'll dig into that a little bit more in a couple minutes. But it's absolutely critical. You want to make sure that customers are comfortable and confident and do stick around through the transition, and that they recognize the changes that you're making to the brands are going to be to their benefit. On the vendor and supply chain side, you're going to have to look at historical vendors in the acquiring company, as well as vendors that are being picked up in the new company. You've got to make sure that there aren't any competitive threats or issues where vendors can't work with each other or won't work with each other, and that you have continuity in the supply chain. You've got to work your way through systems and processes. This is going to be really technical, and it's going to be challenging because we all rely on all kinds of systems to do our work today, whether it's an email system, a scheduling system, a lead generation system, a customer tracking system, a point of sale system where customers engage with you for purchases, or the finance systems. We're going to get into all of that and talk a little bit about why that can be so complex. And then also there are HR systems. So how you communicate with employees about their work hours, how they log their work hours, how they get benefits, how they get paid. All of these skew back to systems that may be very different and that are ultimately going to have to be merged. Some are going to have to be merged right away. Some you can take your time and maybe not address for a year or more. In terms of tracking and reporting, you probably are going to start out tracking and reporting on two different companies, and then figuring out how you can merge that into one entity, or to what extent it remains separate, so that you can understand the changes that are going on. Now, the next thing you want to think about is the outward look of the company. So in terms of, let's go to the next slide, Dahlia. This is really critical because this is where your customers, prospects, and vendors often get their information. And if they are not comfortable and confident, they may start taking a walk and going someplace else. The first place I like to recommend starting is with the vision and the mission. So a couple of companies that we've worked with have done a great job of pulling together key employees from the old company and a team of people from the new company to really hash out the mission and vision, understand where they are different, understand what's different, and then figure out how to integrate those. I have one client right now that's working through an integration. And what they found out is that the employees really love the mission of the acquiring company. They feel like that's going to give them a future for their jobs, and they're ready to jump on it and grab it. And that's really the best of all worlds. But you do need to make sure that everybody's clear what that mission and vision is, so that everybody can head to the same point on the horizon. Once you've gotten clear on that, you have tools that you need to address, things like your website. Again, are you going to have two websites, one website? Where do you bring together the two companies? Do you have an overall brand that shows up on pages and says, this new company is part of the old company, or are you going to try and merge it down to one company? And then that carries into your sales literature as well. You've got to pay attention to sales channels and how you communicate with customers. For example, we had a client that the acquiring company did all of its communication through Facebook, but the existing company really relied on LinkedIn. So we had to build skills in both companies to master the communication in both social channels, and to figure out how best to merge those communications so that customers could benefit from both channels. When you look at lead generation, you may have to understand, what is a new lead going to look like? So do you really want all of the customers that you've had in the past? Are there some customers that you may want to fall away now that you've got a larger portfolio to work with? Or are they all going to be precious to you? And to what extent do you have to then segment customers into, and potential customers into, different groups, so that you can appeal to them based on their specific needs and challenges? And then how does that carry forward into the tracking doing in your CRM system? Do you have one CRM system, or do you have now 2 or 3? Then how are you going to merge or make those more uniform and easy to manage? And then you're going to dig into proposals and contracts. This you'll need a little bit of legal help, would be my guess. So you want to make sure over time that your proposals do become uniform. We had one client that had very tight payment terms. And then in the acquiring company, the acquired company actually had terms that were as far out as 6 months. So they were basically financing a lot of work for their clients. And the acquiring company had to make a decision as to what extent they were going to extend credit when they weren't really used to doing that in the past. Now, their solution was actually to bring in a financing company and introduce the new company customers to that financing company and say to them, look, the terms are going to be the same as what you would have with us, but this is a company that is a professional at managing the terms and payment over time. And it took some work, but it works really well, and they're now out of the financing game. Over on the right-hand side are the ways that you're going to meet people. So conventions, trade shows, and associations. A lot of times we find that if the two companies are very similar, that there may be overlap. You may have two company signups, one in the old company, one in the new, to go to a trade show. You're going to have to make a decision. A, can you cancel one of those trade shows? And then do you want to cancel one of those trade show logins or subscriptions? So do you want to go and have two booths, or do you want to have one? And then in that one booth, do you want to show the new company and the old company? That's a really good idea in the first year because people are still getting used to where's the company. But you also have to make sure that the name of the old company and the name of the new company show up on the program somewhere so that people don't assume that that new company or that old company somehow disappeared and they shouldn't be looking for them anymore. That would be the worst of all worlds. In terms of associations, you need to look at what are the memberships and are there duplications, and then are there new associations that you can participate in and learn things from. There are decisions you're going to want to make about memberships, who qualifies to have memberships in organizations, what kind of travel budgets are you going to allow people to have. We've had clients where the normal mode of travel in the old company is coach class and medium priced hotels, and the new company was 4-star hotels and first class, and everybody was not going to be happy if they got moved down, but they didn't want to increase the budget substantially for the old company. So they had to figure out how long they were going to ride with what kind of budget requirements and how they were going to nudge people into a new policy. And that's probably going to mean your finance team is going to be involved as well as your sales team. In terms of relationships, there's both conflicts and opportunities. Well, how are you going to pick up the customers that are coming to you from the new company? How are they going to integrate with the sales team and with the customer service team? Does the customer service team understand the level of service that needs to be provided? We've had clients that have had to figure out, we're used to handling customers over the internet, but in the new company, they're used to running a customer service desk and kid gloving clients. And we actually want to get more experience at that because these are higher paying clients. So you have to teach the skills back and forth. But you have to understand and figure out and explain to everybody, this is what we're trying to do, so that they don't just assume that you've got customers asking for something that maybe they don't have a right to. Now, in terms of working your way through the acquisition, the next thing you've got to think about is the disconnects that are likely to show up. You're going to need HR involvement, so somebody that's good at dealing with job descriptions, pay grades, compensation, time off policies, work hours, and perks. And if you've got, we've seen this a lot, you have people that are joining the new company and they're used to a set of perks that are not available in the old company, or vice versa. So who's going to get what at what level? What are they going to be qualified to get? What are their job descriptions? So you need to look at the job descriptions for both the old company and the new company and align those and make sure that you assign people to the right grade level and the right compensation. Same thing on the customer and supplier side. You've got to work out terms with them. So this is going to take people on the sales or customer service side as well as legal. In terms of relationships, you're going to have to figure out with customers, employees, and suppliers what mode of communication you're going to have, what frequency, and what's the degree of service, which is what I was talking about before. And then again, as a reminder, in terms of systems differences, expect that you're going to run into these all over the map, as I was saying before. Operation systems that may be different, you're going to want to pick the best of both worlds and figure out how to use those consistently. IT is absolutely going to be involved in making recommendations. Your finance systems, you may have different financial systems. Sales may or may not have the same CRM system. So one may be using HubSpot and another may be using Fresh or using Salesforce. And you're eventually going to want to get most of that or all of that into one system, which is going to be the best one for the new company going forward. Getting the salespeople to work together on the systems that they do use, point of sale, for example, as well as the CRM system. Marketing, we talked about a bit before, what channels, what programs, who do you use, and then HR, and what are you going to ask people to use for their communication with the company and the company's communication with them. In terms of quality, you're going to have to decide what standards are going to prevail, and I'll talk about quality a little bit more in a couple minutes, but you're going to want to set quality standards, and you're going to want to publicize those across the whole company. You probably aren't going to get that done in the first week, month, and maybe not in the first quarter. You're going to need to hash that out, but at some point, you're going to have to publish your quality standards, and then you're going to have to figure out who's in charge. So you don't want people running around saying, I'm in charge, when they're not, or they shouldn't be. And at the same time, you don't want somebody saying, look, pay attention to me, I'm in charge, and nobody believes that that's the case. So you've got to do the anointing as well. Now, when it comes to measuring success after the acquisition, we've got some recommendations for you as well. You want to use goals to set an agenda, KPIs to stay on track, and then make sure that you make time to reflect. And we're going to dig into each one of these. So let's start with goals and key performance indicators. You want to use these in order to answer the questions, are we on track? What's off? What needs correction? And be able to catch it quickly. You want to make sure that you know if you're making enough and you're making enough fast enough. You want to be able to identify what expertise might be missing and where you're overspending or where you might need to make cuts or adjustments. In addition to that, I'm going to give you some examples for goals. So let's go to the next slide. In terms of goals, tracking can be by week, by month, by quarter, or by year, and different goals will have different tracking schedules, and then will get played out underneath the goals with key performance indicators. But one of the things you want to make sure that you are doing here is you're clear what the goals are. So you do want to have goals for revenue, gross profit, overhead, and net profit. My recommendation is for the new company that those be set for a year out, not a quarter, because it may take time to grow up into the goals. You want to make sure that you understand how much debt you're willing to take on and how much cash on hand needs to be in place in the new company to keep that company safe and then prepare it for the next round of growth. I recommend setting standards for both customer and employee retention. So what's acceptable in terms of losses and what's not acceptable. You want to make sure that you're clear about the percent of the long-term forecast that's completed. So So in terms of the long-term forecast, in the first quarter, it may not be 25% of the first year. It may be we only want to be done with 10% of the forecast. And that by the third quarter, we're actually ramping up to over 75%, so that it's smooth sailing into the fourth quarter. You want to set goals for error and success rates as well. So this helps to feed into quality assurance. So as a company, what kinds of errors, we're going to have errors, we know that, let's admit it, but what kinds of errors are acceptable, or what rate of errors? Or if you want to say it on the positive side, what are we looking for in terms of success rates? And then you can also go and look at customer complaints or compliments, and set standards. So, we want to get so many customer compliments in on a monthly basis, and we're going to work our way up to that. Or we don't want to see complaints go above a certain level. Now let's go into a little bit more examples of goals. You want to think about your goals as setting you up to be able to do analysis, so that you can actually assess your customer retention and loss rates. You can look at profit per customer, so setting a standard for particular profit from a particular customer. You want to look at employee and vendor performance versus goals. So we want to be able to see how they're doing against where we want them to be long term. One of the goals that I like is revenue per full-time equivalent, and I like to see this usually in the 150 to 200,000 per FTE when you're measuring everybody from the CEO down to the janitor. And then you can also go and look at competitor benchmarks. So look at competitors that are similar businesses who are successful. Take a look at benchmarks that they're using and see how you can apply that and turn that into goals for your company. That will help you do analysis on how you're doing. With that, let's go over and look at key performance indicators. These are starting to take the goals down to a smaller level, so you track these more frequently, and this gives you a way to see real time what's happening, and to know where to jump in to make adjustments, or it's smooth sailing, let's just keep on going, we're right on track. Some things to look at might be minimum cash deposits daily, how you're doing with percent of on-time deliveries. So we have one company that's measuring their integration across 3 companies, and their on-time delivery goal is 92% standard, and they're seeing that they're doing well in 2 of the companies, but one of the companies is struggling, and they're able to watch this weekly and then jump in with resources to help the operation in the struggling entity. If you're doing manufacturing, you might want to look at setting key performance indicators for machine time by product, so you can actually post these right on the machines where people can look at them and see how they're doing. You could look at average time from start to finish if you're either on the service side and taking in an order and then delivering it, or on the production side if you're manufacturing. The same question: how long does it take us to make it start to finish, and how well are we doing with all of the deliveries? You want to look at average employee uptime, and this can be a really helpful indicator. If you are seeing that your average employee uptime is dropping because people are starting to take more time off, this may be an indicator that you've got people who are thinking about defecting, or are not happy with what's going on and starting to take time off in order to give themselves some relief from the situation that they're not in agreement with. And this gives you a chance to then go in and start doing some damage repair. If you carry inventory, you might want to set either min-max goals, look at inventory depth. This will help you understand the extent to which you're either overstocked or understocked, and that'll help you with your financial budget as well. Let's go and look at the next slide. Here are a few more examples. This is going to be something that is going to play into the long-term goals, how much cash is needed. So typically you want to have at least 3 months of cash on hand just to operate, and a minimum of 6 to 9 months of cash on hand in order to facilitate the next round of expansion. So if you're looking at your cash on hand, you want to see how you're doing with that on usually a monthly basis. Although with one client, we found that we had to track it actually on a weekly basis because cash fluctuated so much during the course of the month. And so we had to compare week by week in multiple month cycles. You want to look at the employees and contractors that you might need to add $1 million. So now you're starting to get into planning that's going to help with the expansion of the growth of the business as you stabilize the integration and are starting to get ready to push forward. And that means you want to look at where the business is in the cycle from 0 to 100. You see a lot of examples of graphs and dials over the left. And if you're trying to set some measures, just recognize that you're going to start slow and you're going to ramp up, and you're not going to be at 100 on the first week that you take over. And so you got to understand what that ramp up looks like. We have one client right now that's about 90 days into an acquisition, and the owner is really having to work on his level of patience and acceptance, recognizing that the sales per day is going to ramp up, and he was getting frustrated that it wasn't on a monthly basis where he wanted it to be. But when we broke it back down and showed how it was ramping up on a daily basis, that on a daily basis it was actually growing by about 20 to 30% day over day. So it was ramping up rapidly. It's just that when we looked at it on a monthly basis, we had a low beginning in the month and a high end, and the average in there across the whole month was dragging down how the month was performing. And when he started looking at it on a day-by-day basis and what the percentage of ramp up was day after day, it helped a lot. And we were also able to show him there was one day that was just went almost to 0, and that messed up the numbers for that particular month. But when we identified it on a day-to-day basis, what we were able to see is that that was a weather-related event, and it had nothing to do with the progress that the business was making, even though the initial interpretation looking at the numbers on a monthly basis was that we were in trouble. And we're not in trouble at all. We just had one slow day. All right, so let's go look at the next slide. This is the last piece that I talked about, or second to last piece, of making time to reflect on the lessons learned. And we have some recommendations for you here. Make sure that you put someone in charge of monitoring progress. This may or may not be the person that is in charge of the integration overall. So this is the person who's reporting on how things are going. Make sure that you do set up meeting schedules and have a way to keep on top of what's going on, which is again through reporting, and then that you demand accountability. This is something I do recommend that you put in place very early on, that there is a standard of accountability that you expect from everyone, and that you don't let the culture fade into, well, it's not ready yet, we'll get to it. So let's go dig into these a little bit more. In terms of putting someone in charge, I recommend early on laying out a few org charts. One is each company separately, and then a vision of how it might look combined. I would do this by position rather than individual at first, and then once you're clear what it looks like, add individual names, but keep it by position so that you can see where the differences in positions between the two companies might be, and to see what work you have to do to align positions. And at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to then move names around on the org chart without disturbing the functional positions that exist on that org chart. You do need to figure out who reports to whom, and for the new company to tell them who are their go-tos in the old company in case they need information, and in the old company to make it clear who they need to be watching out for in the new company. You do, as I said way back in the beginning, decide who you need from the old team and the new team, and whether that's 100% or partial, and who's going to be their backup so that they can step away from some of the tasks that they used to do. When you're looking at moving people onto specialty teams and moving up in the two companies or the keepers as you merge companies together, you want to think about who gets work done and who makes good decisions. And those could be two different judgment factors. And as you work through these questions of who gets work done and who makes good decisions, you also want to then make sure that as you add people into the organization of the future, that you're clear with people, this is why you're being added to the team. As you work on laying out the organization, also separate quality assurance. Make sure that that does not go up the operations line or the sales line, but reports directly to the owner of the company. What you don't want to have is customers who have problems with operations and they make a complaint to quality assurance, and quality assurance reports to the head of operations. So they're just stuck in a loop that may not get fixed if the head of operations doesn't see it the same way. So separate out that quality assurance reporting line. Now, you do want to set up meeting schedules, or you want to make sure you're not going to do this. You're going to ask your teams of people to do this. There are going to be some meetings that are going to happen daily, some that are weekly, and then some that are less frequently. Make sure that there is a note taker available. There's a lot of AI tools to help with that. Make sure that you build next steps lists. If you have trouble building next steps lists, come and talk to us. Next steps lists, in my opinion, are critical to the success of the integration, because people only hear part of what happens and they need something they can go back and refer to and go, oh yeah, I forgot, I've got to get that done. You want to set up regular, consistent meetings, and so the person or people who are in charge of holding those meetings need to be people who are good at enforcing a schedule. Now, some of those meetings could be daily to start, and then they go to weekly, and then they go to every other week as things settle down and things work more smoothly, and there are less things to talk about. But you need to make sure that there is a consistent schedule and people are held accountable for showing up for the meetings that they're assigned to. You want to meet also not just overall, so the daily meeting overall could be a 15-minute call every morning. How's things going? Here's some things that came up in the reports last night that we need to pay attention to. Who needs help with anything? Who needs an additional staff member assigned to them or an additional resource? So kind of a clearinghouse every morning. But then you also want to have functional meetings, so sales, finance, marketing, operations, and human resources, dedicated to those functions with people in those functions where they can talk openly, both in the old co and the new co, about how it's going, what help they need, what they're trying to get done, what their goals are. And I would suggest that maybe you set up a schedule of one of these functions a day. So Monday is the sales meeting, Tuesday is the finance meeting, Wednesday is the marketing meeting, and so on. So people know what day they need to get on in order to get information related to those specific functions. Also, I recommend an overall meeting, the leaders from each area of the business, and probably once a week to start, where they get to hash out how it's going and talk from a leadership point of view. As an owner, this is definitely a meeting you may want to sit in and monitor. I don't suggest that you try and run it, but rather watch how it's going. And this will give you a chance to assess how your leaders are stepping up. And then you want to be very clear who reports to the top and what gets filtered out. So you don't want to have an overall leader meeting that turns into a gripe fest. And at the same time, you don't want people who are in sales saying, well, I got to go talk to the president. That may or may not be the right path for them. So you've got to be clear about the meeting structure and how information flows up through the organization and what's appropriate to talk about. And that also could have cultural differences. Then in terms of the last slide here, we're going to talk about setting up accountability. So Dahlia, if you could go to the next slide. And on this slide, Dahlia, can you go to the next slide? There we are. I'm sorry. We got 2 slides to go. My bad. You want to keep on top of what's going on, and you've got a lot of tools to do it. In addition to reporting, you can do surveys with customers, employees, vendors. You can do these very frequently and have like one topic questions. So how was your experience today? What's the top question of the day from employees or vendors? What do you want to see next? And you can also do overall surveys on how it's going. Make sure that you use surveys to your advantage and encourage people to participate in them in order to give you feedback. With employees, you may want to do them confidentially just so that employees feel more comfortable giving you outright feedback. Do make sure to make time to meet with key players. As an owner, you want to do some management by walking around, whether it's taking people offline and talking with them for a few minutes, inviting people out to lunch individually or in groups or out for breakfast, or having a check-in meeting at the end of the day with people. You want to make sure that you use an informal method as well to tap in and get a sense as to the tenor of how things are going. And in terms of how things are going as an owner, make sure that you and your management team understand it's not all going to go smoothly. So don't get your knickers in a knot when things aren't going right. Just be calm, be ready to step in, be willing to revise, don't give up on what's going on, but just it's something that you have to work on, and be patient and stay with it. So now let's go to the last slide, which I think is really the heart of what you have to do with the organization, is set a culture of accountability. Make sure that you are reviewing individual and group performance, that you're talking with people about where they're stepping up, recognizing people who are stepping up, and also making sure that people who are not stepping up, who are doing the minimum, that they get the feedback that that's not going to cut it, that that's not acceptable. Do ask people for solutions and suggestions. Sometimes the best solutions will come from the very bottom of the organization, the people that are dealing with the challenges day to day. Encourage them to speak up. Use this accountability structure to find out who can contribute and who can make a big contribution to the future of the business. Make it clear that you do expect people to make mistakes, but you expect them to learn from their mistakes. So it's okay to make a mistake, but it's not okay to blindly continue to repeat those mistakes. They've got to learn and get better at what they're doing. And then use that information and that accountability to identify quarterly what goals need to be adjusting. So you had a plan when you took over, you built that plan into a set of goals, and now you're living real time with what's happening. It may be going as fast as you wanted, it may not, it may be going faster than you expected. Be prepared to adjust those goals quarterly so that everybody can understand and talk about what's going well and what that means to the future. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up and go to Q&A time. Dahlia, please let me know what questions we have. Any of you that have questions, please drop them into the chat window right now, and we'll take a few minutes to answer questions. If you do want to chat, please let us know who you are, and Dahlia and I will reach out to set up time to talk with you. Please let us know that if you'd like to talk. I love talking to business owners about their businesses. No obligation, just let's talk about what's going on, what questions you have, and see if we can help.
Great, thank you, Andi. I think this will be a really good question to start with to kind of wrap everything up. So, out of everything that you've mentioned, if you had to take away one or two things, what would you say are the most important steps to take in the first 90 days after an acquisition to ensure long-term success?
I would say to set goals. This is what we expect. To make it clear that you expect to hold people accountable for working to achieve those goals and reporting when things are not going well so that everybody can work on solutions, and to pay attention to both customers and finances. So get your hands on the books, make sure that you have good flow from customers and how they pay for you, that the money isn't disappearing somewhere or getting lost, and then that you've got good control over those customers that you have, and the sales organization is in sync, happy, and working on closing new business.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Here's another question. Do you have any tips for maintaining company culture and employee morale during the integration process?
I think a lot of that is communication, and it's communication about what your standards are, so that accountability, but it's also communication about how you want to have a long-term relationship with your employees and your customers. So you did this acquisition because you're in the game for the long term. You didn't do this acquisition to get out in 90 days. That's not the game you're playing. One of the clients that worked on an acquisition had some concerns about the newco's employees and would they be on board. And when they went over and met with the new employees, or the newly acquired employees, and talked about the values and the mission of their company and how they wanted to get feedback from employees on that values and mission, what they found was that the new co-employees were thrilled to hear that this was a company that wanted to grow, wanted to reward employees, wanted to have people on board who wanted to have a future, who wanted to move up in the organization, and wanted to have opportunities that would benefit themselves and their families, and that they could be bonded to a company that really cared about its customers. So it was a great, easy conversation to have. But they were a little worried in the beginning because they just weren't sure how people were going to react. Don't put off meetings because you don't know how people are going to react. Make sure that you step in and you start communicating right away. And if stuff does get dicey and you start getting a lot of questions you're not prepared for, then be prepared to call a meeting and say, look, I think we're going to stop here for today. I need a few days to think through the questions you're giving. If you have any more questions, please send them to this email address. And I want to come back in a week and I want to address all of this. And we'll have another town hall meeting to talk about the stuff that you're raising, because I think you're raising good points. As long as you're communicating, you're halfway home to being able to win the game.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you, Andy. In your experience, what would you say is the most common mistake you see business owners making post-acquisition?
Not being ready. So that I was just talking with a client of ours that's been through the early phase. They're about 120, 130 days into their integration, and the person in charge of finance said, "Man, this has just been a wild ride because we really didn't have enough staff on board pre-acquisition to be able to go and put time in over at the new company to take control." They did hire new staff right around the time of the acquisition, but that new staff had to learn how the company worked, had to learn the old co-systems, as well as then jump half-time over into the new company and explain how those new systems that they were just learning worked for the new company. So I think she was articulating it well when she was saying, I wish we'd had a little bit more time to get ready to do this, but at the same time, they had an opportunity. It was a good acquisition. They're going to be financially in great shape when they get done with this. And the other thing that I do think a lot of times business owners don't have enough financing lined up. So they focus on getting the financing lined up to do the acquisition, not to have the credit lines available to support the company through the first 150 or 180 days. And we had a client that went through this, and they had the funding available to do the acquisition, but they had to scramble to then go get a credit line set up to support the cash flow, so they didn't have to pull it out of their bank accounts in the old co.
Great, thank you. What are some tips you would give to approach cultural integration when the acquired company has a very different management style or different values?
So I would encourage, if you know that that's what's going to happen, I would encourage people to have integration discussions and to pull groups of people together from the old co and from the new co, and not to have somebody in charge like it's going to be my way or the highway, unless that's something you think you have to do. But generally, when you start with discussions, let's talk about what in the old co our ways of doing things have been, and then let's talk about in the new co what our ways of doing things have been, and let's brainstorm what are some of the best ideas out of that. And it gives you a chance also to see how people react. Now, you may not get to implement all of the ideas you're coming up with, but you at least begin to build a board of things that you need to be working on and thinking about. These are people, and people usually have pretty good ideas. There aren't very many that tend to go off the reservation. And if you have one of those, you can take them aside outside of the meeting and say, look, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think what you're saying is going to be helpful right now. So I need you to tone it down, or I need you to step back out of the meeting for a little while.
And so I think this might be our last question. Great
Okay.
way to end it. What are some early warning signs of misalignment between systems, people, or maybe strategy that we should watch out for?
So, Dolly, why don't you go to the next slide, and we'll just throw that one up here and people can be thinking about ways that we can help. And in terms of misalignment, you've got to really walk your way through all of these steps. So you've got to make sure that you do have goals and that you can measure against goals, and that those goals are taking into account short and long term where the value is or isn't. So, you may have a goal of 100% customer retention until you find out that 20% of the NewCo's customers aren't profitable. And then you've got to adjust that goal, and you've got to explain to people in the NewCo why you're doing that, not just wipe out that list of customers. And you've got to get rid of those customers in a way that doesn't get you a bad reputation in the market. So you may have to kid glove it. You've got to, you've really got to bring in people who are smart and talented and willing to work hard and willing to show you what they know how to do, and use them to train and coach and resolve conflicts and build accountability. Now, we can help with all of that, the assessment and the training and the coaching, and oftentimes it helps to have an outsider step in, because we can focus some of the challenges on us and coming from us rather than coming from inside, and sometimes that helps. But you also then do have to make sure that you're preparing not just the current management team, but what's underneath that management team, what the next generation is, and starting to identify that talent pool early on so that the company does survive not just the integration, but it's prepared to move forward. In terms of ownership opportunities and transitions, sometimes you do acquisitions and you're bringing an owner from the acquired company along for a ride for a period of time. You got to make sure that they're standing up and doing what they promised they would do, and that they're also productive in what they're doing, and we can help with that. And finally, you want to just make sure that you've got a company that is going to end up run by confident owners and managers, that's thriving, that's in a position to double revenue and triple profit and go forward into the future. And that really gets you to where we see our ultimate mission, which is creating wealth for our clients, whether it's individual employees, the company overall, the owners and shareholders of the company. This is about creating a future that builds wealth and value for our economy.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy.
So with that, I want to thank everyone who's been here. And thank you for coming today. If you have questions, please let us know who you are, and we'd love to talk with you more about what your business is all about. Take care.